Today we are talking about gatekeepers, biblical and like a modern day gatekeeper. What are gatekeepers? Gatekeepers are people that are stationed at entry points, access points, the coming and the going. They're there to guard against intruders. They're there to say what goes in and what comes out, whether it be just items. Like, in biblical times, they were dealing with animal sacrifices and breads and spices and things like that. And it was the gatekeeper's job to deal with the things going in and out. It was the gatekeeper's job to deal with the things that were inside of the temple. In 1 Chronicles 9:22-33, I suggest you go ahead and read that. But for the sake of time, I will just summarize. The Levites, they were responsible for rooms and in the treasuries of the house of God. They spent their nights in the house of God. They spent all their time in the house of God. All of the gatekeepers stayed in the temple when they were on duty. They would actually switch out between each other every 7 days. And some of the gatekeepers were assigned to articles of worship. Some were assigned to the furniture. Some were assigned to the actual sanctuary and the supplies needed to run the temple. Like flour, wine, incenses, spices that they needed to make oils and stuff like that. So that was all of the jobs of a gatekeeper. And when you think about it in modern times, you almost think of an usher and a deacon, the people that run around and make sure all of the stuff on the inside of the church is functioning, flowing, everything that we need for worship is there and operational. It's very much the same thing. And then, they also, in biblical times, they were in charge of maintaining the holiness of the temple, because the temple is the place where God chooses to come and dwell, and he has his ways of how he wants. All through the Bible, God will tell you real quick how to build something. And he made no exception when it came to the temples. In Exodus 25, I think it is 25 verse 8 and 9, he goes and he talks about how he wants the temple actually in charge of keeping the holiness. They were also in charge of keeping the reverence for God. So in order to do that, their hearts had to be on fire for God. They had to live a life that had fear of God in it. And gatekeepers were often chosen because they were reliable, because their hearts were on fire for God, because they weren't afraid to speak up and maintain the holiness and inside of the temple. So today when we talk about gatekeepers, it's a little bit different in a sense, just because we don't live at the church. We don't we don't really necessarily stand guard in front of the physical church, and ward off armies and things like that. But we do still stand, we still watch and have our guards in the spirit. And I think that because it's not so much a physical thing, that people kind of neglect it, negate it, think it's not that big of a deal, because it's something that's not seen. It's something that's done in, the effects are seen in the spirit, but not necessarily in a way that we can just walk up and see it. But, gatekeepers are very important. And even though It is not a job that is glorious in the way that people want so much glory these days. It is a job that is very important to God. God needs gatekeepers. God needs watchmen. God needs intercessors. And these are the jobs that nobody wants to do, because these are the jobs that don't really put you in the front line in front of man, but they do tend to put you in the front line of God's army. Nobody wants to be in the front line of God's army. Everybody wants to be in the front line in front of men. But let's not get distracted. In Nehemiah 7:1, it says, after the walls were finished, and I had set the doors and the gates, the gatekeepers, singers, and the Levites were appointed. And that, again, just shows you how important gatekeeping is. When God is ready to begin something, and he has built up the walls and he has got it situated, the first thing he is going to do is assign gatekeepers and watchmen and a shepherd. And he is going to, and your musicians for your praise and worship. He's going to set those things in stone before he even gets the ball rolling to where he wants the ball to roll. And it is important because, we don't struggle against flesh and blood. We struggle against powers and things like that. So people think that because there isn't an army marching physically that you can see that there isn't an army marching. But there is an army marching. It is definitely always at work, and it is definitely always trying to tear down the work of God. And, so you need these stations to be manned before you can do the work of God, to keep these intruders out. People think that the Bible is not relevant for today, but it is. It's very much relevant for today. The things that occurred in the Bible still occur today. We just need to open up our spiritual eyes to see it. It is not something that is occurring right in front of us that we can see with our natural eyes, which is why people are missing the mark. But more primary roles of a modern day gatekeeper per se would be to defend the gospel. It is a very sad time that we live in, that the gospel is not spoken in church. The gospel is diluted and watered down in the church. And, it is up to gatekeepers and the people that have answered the call to gatekeep to defend the true gospel, undiluted. And it is also the gatekeeper's job, even today, even in 2023, where holiness really isn't a thing, to still call for holiness in the church, still call for reverence of God in the church, still call for people's hearts to be on fire for God in the church. And, they are intercessors. They pray, and, prayer and intercessors, like I said, they are not front seat. And so that's why nobody wants the job. Because everybody can't see them doing it. So nobody wants the job. But, they are the ones that are in the background praying for God's will to pass. They are the ones that will not stop praying until they begin to see God's will pass. And, those are the gatekeepers that God wants, and those are the gatekeepers that God needs, and those are the gatekeepers that the church needs. And we really need gatekeepers. And if the Lord is calling you to be a gatekeeper, answer the call. Nobody is answering the call. If the Lord is calling you to be a watchman or an intercessor, answer the call. No one wants to take their post. No one wants to watch. No one wants to pray. No one wants to guard the gates of the Lord's house. And I believe it was David that said, I'd rather be a doorkeeper in the house of my God than to dwell in the tents of the wicked. And with that being said, that is my little mini spiel on gatekeeping.